This is not my son, Chioma. You must return him to his father. I can't raise another man's child. How could you bring someone else's child into my house, telling me he's mine? In fact, you are leaving my house today. You've been doing it before, and now your secret is out. Femi's voice thundered through the room, his words cutting deep like a sharp blade. Chioma stood frozen, her eyes welling up with tears. Her heart raced as she tried to process what had just been said. Was this the end of everything she had built with Femi? The beginning of their love story. Femi was a young and handsome businessman, full of life and ambition. Everyone admired him for his kindness and determination. He met Chioma, a beautiful and soft-spoken lady, at a family wedding. She was charming and carried herself with grace. Femi was immediately drawn to her. It didn't take long before they fell in love and got married. Their love story was like a fairy tale. Femi adored Chioma, and the two were inseparable. He trusted her completely and did everything to make her happy. Whenever Femi went out, he made sure to buy her gifts. From beautiful dresses to sweet perfumes, he never returned home empty-handed. They would laugh together, share meals, and sometimes go to fancy restaurants to enjoy each other's company. Their home was filled with joy and laughter, and 2 years into their marriage, Chioma gave birth to a baby boy. They named him OluwaSeun, meaning, God has done it. Femi's joy knew no bounds. He doted on the child, buying every baby item he could think of. He became the doting father who was always there, playing with his son and singing him lullabies. When OluwaSeun turned 2, the family was blessed again, this time with a beautiful baby girl named Clara. Their little family felt complete, and Femi loved both children dearly. But as time passed, doubts and secrets began to creep into their once perfect life. Years passed, and the once perfect marriage between Femi and Chioma began to show cracks. Femi had always loved and trusted Chioma, but a seed of doubt had been planted in his heart. At first, he tried to ignore it, but the nagging suspicion about his son, OluwaSeun, refused to fade. Femi decided to find out the truth once and for all. One sunny morning, Femi approached Chioma in their cozy sitting room. The children were playing in their room, their laughter echoing throughout the house. "Honey," Femi began, "I want to take the kids out today. For some ice cream." Chioma, folding some clothes, looked up and smiled. "Wait, let me come with you," she said cheerfully. Femi shook his head. "Don't worry about it, my love. I'll bring you something special when we get back." Chioma nodded, thinking nothing of it. It wasn't unusual for Femi to take the kids out on his own. "All right, no problem," she replied. As soon as Femi left the house, his expression darkened. His heart raced as he drove to the hospital with OluwaSeun and Clara in the back seat. He had already made arrangements with a trusted doctor for a DNA test. At the hospital, the doctor smiled warmly. "Mr. Femi, please have a seat. This won't take long." Femi watched nervously as samples were taken from him and the children. While waiting, he kept glancing at OluwaSeun, trying to reassure himself. "He's my son," Femi thought. "There's no way he isn't." After what felt like hours, the doctor called Femi into his office. His expression was serious. "Mr. Femi, I don't know how to say this." "What do you mean?" Femi asked, his voice trembling. The doctor sighed. "The DNA results show that OluwaSeun is not your biological son. Clara is yours, but the boy isn't." Femi's world shattered in that moment. He felt as though the ground had been ripped from under him. "What?" he yelled, standing up. "Are you sure? This has to be a mistake." "I'm sorry, Mr. Femi, but the results are accurate." Femi clenched his fists, his breathing heavy with anger. He grabbed the papers and stormed out of the office, dragging the children with him. Back at home, Chioma had prepared lunch and was eagerly waiting for Femi and the kids. As soon as she heard the car pull up, she hurried to the door. "My love, you're back," she said, her face lighting up. But her smile quickly faded when she saw Femi's cold, stony expression. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked, concerned. Femi ignored her and stormed into the living room, slamming the DNA results onto the table. Who is the father of this child? He demanded, his voice shaking with rage. Chioma froze, her heart skipping a beat. What are you talking about, honey? She asked, confused. Who is the father? Femi repeated, his voice rising. Femi, you're his father. What's going on? Chioma replied, panic setting in. Femi thrust the DNA test results in her face. Explain this, he yelled. Chioma's hands trembled as she read the document. Her face turned pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. This can't be true, she stammered. My love, you are his father. I swear to God, since we got married, I have never slept with another man. Femi's face twisted with pain and disbelief. Don't lie to me, Chioma. After everything I've done for you, making sure you're happy, providing for you, and this is how you repay me. By bringing another man's child into my house. Chioma fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, my love, trust me. I don't understand this. I swear on everything, OluwaSeun is your son. But Femi's heart was hardened. You will return him to his father, he said coldly. And you will leave my house. I can't live with someone who betrays me like this. Femi, please. Chioma cried, clutching his legs. You are the only man I've ever been with. Please believe me. But Femi pulled away from her grasp, his mind clouded with anger and betrayal. The tension in Femi and Chioma's home was unbearable. After the shocking results of the first DNA test, Femi agreed to Chioma's tearful plea to seek a second opinion. Early the next morning, they left for another hospital, both of them silent throughout the car ride. The hospital was busy with patients coming and going, but the couple's world felt frozen. Chioma's heart raced as they sat in the waiting room, holding OluwaSeun. Femi stared blankly ahead, his jaw tight with frustration. Hours later, the doctor called them in. Mr. and Mrs. Femi, we have the results, he said, his expression neutral. Femi leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. What does it say? He asked, his voice trembling. The doctor adjusted his glasses and looked at the report. The results confirmed that you, Mr. Femi, are not the biological father of OluwaSeun. Chioma gasped and covered her mouth. Her vision blurred as tears streamed down her face. How can this be? She whispered. I swear, Femi, you are the father. Femi stood up abruptly, his face contorted with rage. Enough, Chioma. Stop lying to me, he yelled, storming out of the office. Chioma struggled to compose herself as she followed him, holding OluwaSeun close. When they arrived home, Femi's anger boiled over. He stormed into the bedroom and began pulling Chioma's clothes from the wardrobe, throwing them into a suitcase. Get out of my house, he shouted. You and that child you brought into my home. Chioma fell to her knees, wailing. Please, Femi. I don't understand this. I swear on my life, you're the father. Please believe me. Her cries echoed through the house, attracting the attention of neighbors. Just then, Femi's best friend, Isaac, walked into the compound. Isaac was a wise and respected man, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful advice. Femi, my friend, what's going on here? Isaac asked, noticing Chioma sobbing on the floor and Femi angrily dragging her bags outside. Come inside, Femi said, his voice still laced with anger. Let me tell you everything. Inside the house, Femi sat Isaac and Chioma down, narrating the events of the past 2 days. He showed Isaac the DNA test results from both hospitals. Isaac listened carefully, his face thoughtful. When Femi finished, Isaac turned to him and said, My friend, let me tell you something important. No matter what anyone says, a woman always knows who the father of her child is. If Chioma was lying, she wouldn't be crying like this. Look at her, she's broken. Her pain is real. Femi frowned. So, are you saying the 2 DNA tests we did are lying? Or are you saying both doctors are wrong? What exactly are you trying to say, Isaac? Are you covering for her? Isaac calmed him down. Relax, my friend. I'm not accusing anyone. But there's something you might not know. Do you realize there's a different kind of DNA test specifically for women? It can trace paternity through the mother's lineage. Femi blinked in confusion. What are you talking about? I've never heard of such a thing. Yes, Isaac continued, it's called mitochondrial DNA testing. It's a more advanced way to confirm parentage, and it might clear up this issue. Isaac's suggestion planted a seed of doubt in Femi's mind. Could it be that both tests were wrong? Was there a chance that science could uncover the truth in a way he hadn't considered? Chioma, still crying, looked up at Isaac with hope. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you for believing me, she said, her voice trembling. Femi, though still angry, nodded reluctantly. Fine. We do this test you're talking about. But if it shows the same result, Chioma, you're leaving this house for good. Isaac placed a reassuring hand on Femi's shoulder. You're doing the right thing, my friend. The truth will come out. The following day, Femi and Chioma returned to the hospital for the mitochondrial DNA test as suggested by Isaac. Chioma sat nervously in the waiting room, clutching OluwaSeun tightly while Femi paced back and forth. He barely spoke to her, his mind racing with questions and doubts. Hours later, the doctor called them into his office. He looked at them with a serious expression. Mr. and Mrs. Femi, the results confirm that OluwaSeun is not your biological son. Chioma froze, her mind spinning. How is this possible? She whispered, tears streaming down her face. I gave birth to him in the hospital. He was placed in my arms. I don't understand. Femi, struggling to control his emotions, turned to the doctor. Explain this to me. How can this happen? The doctor leaned forward and said, the only explanation is that there might have been a mix-up at birth. I suggest you return to the hospital where your son was born to investigate further. Determined to uncover the truth, Femi and Chioma traveled back to the hospital where OluwaSeun was born. They met with Dr. Williams, the doctor in charge at the time. After hearing their complaint, Dr. Williams immediately instructed the staff to retrieve the birth records from that day. As the files were brought out, Dr. Williams said, this is an extremely rare situation, but it has happened in the past. We'll need to contact all the families who gave birth on the same day as you. The couple watched anxiously as the staff began making calls to the families listed in the records. Some of the families had moved to Lagos, while others were in Abuja. The first family contacted was the Adebayos, who now lived in Lagos. Femi and Chioma traveled there with Dr. Williams to conduct the first DNA test. When they arrived at the Adebayos' home, they were greeted warmly but with confusion. Mrs. Adebayo, who had given birth to a baby boy on the same day as Chioma, listened to their story with wide eyes. This is unbelievable, she said, holding her son tightly. But we are willing to do the test to find out the truth. The DNA test was conducted, and the results came back 2 days later. Dr. Williams called both families to reveal the results. I'm sorry to say, Mr. and Mrs. Adebayo, the boy Stephen you think is your son is not biologically yours. However, OluwaSeun is your biological son, Dr. Williams said. And Dr. Williams looked at Mr. and Mrs. Femi and said, I'm sorry Stephen is not your own son. Chioma felt a pang of hope but also dread. The mystery was far from solved. Femi, Chioma, and Dr. Williams then traveled to Abuja to meet the second family, the Davids. The David were a reserved but kind couple who listened carefully as Dr. Williams explained the situation. We are heartbroken to hear this, Mr. David said. But if it helps uncover the truth, we'll do the test. The DNA samples were taken, and again, the results came back a few days later. This time, the truth unraveled in an unexpected way. Mr. and Mrs. Femi, Dr. Williams began, the child Mr. and Mrs. Adebayo have been raising as their son, Stephen, is the biological child of Mr. and Mrs. David. And the child the David have been raising, Paul, is your biological son. Chioma burst into tears, overwhelmed by the revelation. Femi, too, felt a wave of emotions. He was relieved to know his biological son had been found but devastated by the thought of giving up the boy he had raised for so long. The Davids brought Paul into the room, a bright-eyed little boy who looked just like Femi. For a moment, Femi froze, unable to speak. Then, with tears in his eyes, he knelt down and hugged Paul tightly. "My son," he whispered. "You're my son?" Mrs. David held Stephen close, tears streaming down her face as she said, "This is our son. We never knew." Both families were overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the situation. They agreed to take time to process everything and decide how to move forward for the sake of the children. The three families sat together in the doctor's office, emotions running high as they listened to the doctor apologize. "I deeply regret the pain this mix-up has caused all of you," the doctor said, his voice heavy with remorse. "It was never intentional. Mistakes like this are rare, but they can happen. I will ensure that we compensate you for this distress, and I will personally take steps to ensure this never happens again in this hospital." Femi nodded but remained silent, his emotions still raw. Chioma, however, spoke up, her voice filled with grace. "Doctor, we understand mistakes happen, but we thank God for leading us to the truth and helping us find our son." The families exchanged phone numbers and promised to keep in touch, knowing their lives had been forever intertwined by this strange twist of fate. Later that day, when Femi and Chioma returned home, Femi held Chioma close and said, "My love, I'm so sorry for doubting you and for all the pain I caused. Please forgive me." Chioma wiped her tears and smiled faintly. "Femi, thank God for revealing the truth. I forgive you. What matters now is that our family is whole again." They embraced, their love rekindled and stronger than ever. From that day on, the family returned to their first love, cherishing every moment together and raising their children with joy and gratitude. What would you do if you found yourself in Femi and Chioma's situation? What lessons can we learn from the way the families handled this emotional situation? Have you ever experienced or heard of a similar real-life story? Share it in the comments below. Life can bring unexpected challenges, but with love, trust, and forgiveness, families can overcome anything. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with friends and family. Thanks for watching and kindly subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can get updates whenever I upload more captivating stories.